Before we get into today's video, I have some exciting news to share with you all about Chilling. Chilling has evolved and now, in addition to having thousands of horror stories, now also has podcasts, short horror films, full-length feature films and shows, with new content being added monthly. Chilling will be releasing an original film called Gale, Stay Away from Oz, centering around the enchanting tale of Wizard of Oz, but in a sinister light. Dorothy Gale, now in her twilight years, bears these scars of a lifetime entangled with the paranormal forces of a mystical realm. These otherworldly encounters have left her shattered, and the echoes of her experiences now reverberate through her soul-living relative, Emily. As Emily is beckoned to confront the unresolved matters of this bone-chilling Oz, a terrifying journey awaits her. Gale, Stay Away from Oz will be streaming exclusively on Chilling, beginning on September 18th, 2023, so go check it out now. You can receive 50% off an annual subscription plan on the website with promo code GALE2023. This is only on the website, not on the app. Again, Gale is an exclusive original film and can only be watched by users with a subscription plan. Without further ado, check out the official trailer and then watch the film on Chilling.
Just relax. Listen to the sounds, the tempo, and just picture yourself there, in your dreams. Can you see it? Talk, tick, talk, tick, talk. Are you there?
Yes. Emily. Yes. Gale. You're Emily Gale. Yes. And you say you're a relation of Dorothy's? I don't know. Maybe? What you have there is a handwritten early draft of Dorothy's first book. Her writings were all based on her dreams of a place. Oz?
I feel this is the best chance we have to unlocking all of this. To finding the truth.
The truth?
Yes! About Dorothy, the slippers.
Stay away from us! Stay away from us! Stay
Your
away
dreams.
from us!
They're the key to all of this.
Stay away from us!
Where am I? Let's start at the beginning, and then you can learn for yourself.
My best friend sent me a note before he passed away. When I read it and knew what it meant, I felt the need to vomit. And that's exactly what I did. Dear Peter, there are a lot of things that I want to say and not enough time to say them all. I wish that I had more time with you. How long has it been? 8 years since you left us. I know you said that you wouldn't come back here, and so far you've kept that promise. I hate that I'm going to make you break it, but you need to come back. There's something wrong here with the island itself. It's sick, Pete. The entire place is dying and nobody's willing to admit it. They keep sending out flyers and brochures encouraging tourists to take a picture of that dang canyon. But nobody seems willing to admit that something about that place is just wrong. You knew the truth, Peter. I think that's why you left. But you need to come home, please. This place needs you. I needed you. It's too late for me, though. Too late to stop what has happened. So don't do this for me. Do it for everyone else here. We need you, Peter. Sorry again for interrupting your life. Macy. I probably reread it 3 times, trying to convince myself that I was wrong about what it implied. But I've known Macy since grade school. This wasn't just a plea for help. This was a letter saying goodbye. I crumpled it up and then pulled up social media to confirm my fears. Macy had drowned the Sunday before. Nobody had bothered to even send me a notice of the funeral. That made sense though, considering that I haven't been home in a while. Macy was off by 2 years, I thought. This September marks a full decade since I had left the little fishing community of Gray Fork. I debated what to do next. I could have simply ignored her letter, kept living my own life here in Illinois, and not worrying about the life that I had back there. But her letter disturbed me because of its contents. The canyon. Most people don't know much about Gray Fork Island except one key detail that our councilmen have promoted like crazy since it happened. A large crater on the south side of the island is claimed to be the site of a UFO crash. Yep, you heard it right. UFOs, aliens, the whole 9 yards. Our community thrives off that nonsense, and it's done so for nearly 30 years. My grandfather, when he was still alive, said that the impact had occurred during the late 1910s. World War I was coming to a close and most people were so focused on the European scene that a strange event in Midwestern America was small news. According to him, an object was seen by local fishermen off the coast of Gray Fork on the evening of November 13th, 1919. It was said to be long and silvery and glowed brighter than a star. At a nearby military outpost, General George Aylesbury gave the order to shoot the object down. And that's exactly what happened, Grandpa said. The UFO was struck and crashed on the south side of the island, creating a canyon that is now affectionately called Colton's Crater. And Colton Ward was the first person on site to excavate the canyon, before the military swooped in and quarantined everything. Colton claimed that he saw 2 massive gray-skinned creatures emerge from the silver capsule. But then the army pulled him away and covered it all up. Or so the story goes. When the public was allowed access to the site again, almost 6 years later, there was no UFO or any evidence to suggest that anything had crashed there in the first place. Colton turned it into a tourist attraction, setting up a shop and a photo booth and even a restaurant. It stayed in business and kept Gray Fork afloat during the Great Depression and World War II. However, in the late 50s, astute miners realized quickly that the site was riddled with radioactive material. And because the contents of the crater were considered so dangerous, the south part of the island became no longer accessible to the public. Decades passed and no one knew the exact details, but eventually it was decided that the levels of contamination were not considered lethal, as long as nobody remained at the crater for a long time. And so the tourist trap was reopened, and Gray Fork flourished again. If I was a betting man, I would guess that palms were greased to get that legislation passed. I've only been around a short 35 years, but I know that money makes the world work. And I also knew that the radioactivity at Colton's Crater had claimed many lives, my father's included. 11 years ago, I saw my mother waste every dime she had, trying to prove that his work at the site had caused his death. It was for this reason I swore that I had to leave and never look back. I couldn't let my dad's death consume me like it had her. Now 10 years later, another death connected to that canyon. This time though, I couldn't just turn a blind eye. I checked my schedule and confirmed that I had the time to take off for the funeral, and then I booked a ferry to get to Grey Fork. I didn't pack a lot because I wasn't planning to stay there for long. I figured a day or two would sort things out, and maybe I could leave before anybody realized that I was even there. I guess that was a fantasy, because on the ferry I had the misfortune of running into an old friend, Philip West, former linebacker for the Grey Fork Guardians. He was also coming to the island for the funeral. "Never thought that I would see you here, Pete. I thought you were gone for good," he told me. "It's personal. Macy and I were best friends," I said as I looked toward the foggy shores of the small island. It looked so desolate. "Is that what she told you?" Philip said with a mild laugh. And then he showed me a letter that he got from Macy. It was identical to the note that I had received. I took it, trying to not feel surprised, and then I looked toward the shore again. Had Macy tricked me to get me back on this miserable rock? If that was the case, my stay might be even shorter than I had expected. I thought sourly as I passed Philip the note back. When I got it in the mail, I found the whole thing quite odd. I haven't spoken to her in years. I left Grey Fork to have a better life, and I've had that good life. I got a wife and kids and a nice paying job. This place hasn't even crossed my mind. Macy's note was a shock to the system. How did she even find my address? And why was she asking me to come back to this dumb old island to investigate a strange canyon? Makes no sense, honestly. He told me. I hated to admit that I hadn't considered all of this before I left home. Philip was coming here to get answers, and I considered asking him if we should work together. But I never did get along with him, and I wasn't planning on making amends now. So I kept my mouth shut as the boat approached the docks, and the air horn announced that we were free to leave. As I grabbed my bags, it began to rain, soaking my body as I ran out toward the bus stop. Grey Fork only had 2 bus lines 10 years ago, and from the look of things, not much had changed. I stood there in the storm debating if I wanted to ride a bus alongside Philip West. And then I saw a man holding a placard with my name on it, standing next to a black Honda SUV. I couldn't help but walk over to him, surprised that anybody would be expecting my arrival. He opened the door to the car, and I found myself staring at the current owner of Colton Canyon and one of my old girlfriends, Jennifer Ward. "Get in, Pete. We need to talk," she said. I didn't argue. I was mystified as to how she knew that I would be here, but it didn't take long for her to reveal what was going on. "I see that you got Macy's letter. I got one too, by the way. Everyone that knew her did, urging us to come here to Grey Fork and check out what happened in that canyon," Jen told me as we drove away from the docks. "Everyone? How many letters did you send?" I asked. "Over the years, a lot of people have left this island. I think if I'm counting you, I found 6 people so far that came back because Macy wrote them a note and begged them to come home," Jen told me. I said nothing as the storm got worse, and we drove up toward the old bed and breakfast that her family ran. Jen told me she had a room for me and anybody else that had gotten a note from Macy. "I'm determined to learn the truth about my family's old stomping grounds," Jen told me. "Old? Do you mean the Wards don't have control over the canyon anymore?" I asked as we pulled to the side of the building, and Jen offered me an umbrella. "My father lost it in a gambling ring 2 years ago. Fool." This place was keeping us from going bankrupt. Now the new manager has let me stay on as a housekeeper until the debt my father paid is gone. But that isn't your problem, Peter. Just get some rest. We will talk tomorrow and maybe all of us can get to the bottom of this, Jen told me. As I went upstairs to try and relax from my long trip, my mind kept spinning about the strange notes that Macy sent. When I first saw it, I had assumed it was a personal plea to make me come to the island and solve the mystery of the canyon. But now I was beginning to realize that it wasn't as close to her as I thought. Why had she brought so many of her old friends here? And how did it connect to the canyon that the wards had used as a tourist trap for decades now? As I settled into my room, I looked out the window toward the south end of Gray Fork. The long, thin canyon stretched into complete darkness, like a wound that would never heal. Something strange was happening deep in its crevices, and I needed to figure out what. I didn't believe in extraterrestrial life, but I was convinced this was not a natural phenomenon happening here. Aliens or not, I would find the truth. If not for Macy, then for my own sanity. I told myself for years that Gray Fork was nothing but a bad memory that I needed to run away from. I told myself that my father's death was just his own fault, and that my leaving was for the best. I had to be right about this, or the last 10 years would be for nothing. The funeral home was located near the middle of the island, an old stone structure that probably dated back to colonial times. Jen promised that we would talk after the services, but honestly, my mind was on seeing my family there at the church. I hadn't said anything to any of them about my return, so when my mom caught my attention across the pews, I knew that this trip was a mistake. I tried my best to get lost in the crowd, but Mom found me as soon as the service had ended. "You have some nerve showing up here," she shouted and pointed a finger straight at my face. She looked terrible and smelled of booze. "Lower your voice," I told her as I saw townspeople give us odd looks. "I don't see why I should. You come here to your friend's funeral, but you didn't even bother to help bury your own father. Can we go somewhere and talk about this?" I pulled her toward the entrance of the church. Philip had heard our exchange and thought that he was going to be a gallant knight. "Mrs. Thorne, is Pete bothering you?" "Stay out of this," I told him. There were words exchanged that I can't repeat, and then he hit me. My mother stopped the fight from getting worse and told me to come to her house. I had a bloody, broken nose to mend, so I didn't argue. When we got there, she nursed my wound with weary, drunken eyes, seemingly lost between joy and anger to see me again. "You shouldn't have come back here," she told me. "Yeah, I'm starting to realize that," I told her as I took an ice pack to my throbbing head. I told her about the note that Macy had sent and the other ones who had received it. Her face went pale when I mentioned the canyon. "You can't go down there. There's evil in that place. It killed your father," she muttered. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I urged her to tell me what had happened 10 years ago. As much as she didn't want to, I convinced her that I wouldn't go to the crash site if she told me. "It was a bad winter. Your dad had just lost a job with the lumber company over on the west side of the island. Even though he had been almost 20 years, it meant nothing to them. Times were tough and the money on Gray Fork was drying up. The only business that seemed to have stood the test of time was that canyon. Howard Ward still owned it back then, and he gladly let your dad come aboard as a supervisor. They needed people willing to take groups deeper into the canyons. Thrill seekers, everyone was trying to prove that the aliens were there. It was a bunch of nonsense. I thought that, and your dad felt the same. As long as it gave us a way to keep a roof over your head. After those first few weeks of work, though, your dad began to act strangely. He would put in extra shifts, trying to find large groups to take into the canyon. And he would never explain what exactly they saw down there, but his face told me everything. There are secrets buried in there, Peter, and your dad let it eat him alive. I later found out that a lot of the people that he took on these tours never left the island, or at least there's no document of their departure. She showed me articles that had paperwork from Colton's Canyon. She had been collecting them for what purpose I wasn't sure. There were discrepancies where some of the information didn't match what Dad had put down. It was like they were keeping two sets of books. You're saying these people disappeared in the mine? I asked. Something happened to them. Why is there no record of them leaving Grey Fork? She asked. I shook my head, not wanting to believe such a tall tale. There are a lot of people here, Mom. You can't hide this, not for this long, I told her. She seemed angry that I didn't believe her and went to her attic to retrieve one final item, a journal that Dad kept, which she claimed held the truth about the caves. I looked through the journal. Most of it was just ramblings and thoughts of Dad trying to figure out more about the canyon. Reading this showed that he was losing his grip on reality near the end. The guilt of what he did to those people. It killed him, Mom said. Sure enough, as I reached the end of the journal, I saw that his ramblings became nothing but gibberish, along with weird drawings that reminded me of what the old tales said the aliens looked like. When did you find all this? I whispered. 5 years back. It took me a lot to get Howard to cough it up, but I think he realized the cave was evil as well. I think he lost the rights to the canyon on purpose. Otherwise, if he had stayed owner, I think he would have eaten a bullet too. That night, I reviewed Dad's journal, writing down what little I could make sense of. There were charts and geological surveys amid notes relating to the military outpost on the east side of Grey Fork. From what I was reading, Howard Ward had an arrangement with the army to maintain the site and continue the tours despite the dangers of radiation. If this was true, the army was knowingly sending people down there. But why? What did they hope to accomplish? I knew the answers had to be in the canyon. I gave Jen a call in the morning and asked where her father was these days. Oh, Dad, he's at the local psych ward at Morning View. He lost his marbles after he lost the business, she told me. I thanked Mom for all her help and hurried to the psych hospital. I had only a day left on Grey Fork and I was determined to make the most of it, learning what I could about this half-century mystery. My initial speculation was the army was hiding some kind of experimental weapon down in the cave. But when I met Howard Ward, everything changed. On the drive up to the hospital, I came up with a good lie about why I was there. Jennifer had sent me there and I was a family lawyer. There were documents that needed to be finalized for the canyon that he had failed to take care of 2 years prior. It was good enough to not raise any eyebrows for the staff, but when Mr. Ward met me in the commons room, he wasn't fooled. You ain't my family lawyer, he muttered as I closed the door. You dated my Jenny, I remember you. And before you call your nurse to shove me out the door, you should take a look at this, I told him. I gave him Macy's note first, and then my father's journal. What is this supposed to mean to me? Howard snarled. Notice anything? The writing here is the same. For almost a decade now, people have thought that my father died a madman, and then I thought the same thing about my closest friend. But that was just part of the cover-up, wasn't it, Mr. Ward? I asked. He diverted his eyes, which told me that I was onto something. My mother believed that the people being sent to that crash site were being killed. What was really happening to them? I asked. Why don't you go down there and find out for yourself? He asked. Well, I plan to do that next, once I find a way. From what I hear, the new owner has the same sweet deal that you had with the army. You knew that those people were being used for some ghastly exploitation, didn't you? I asked. He shook his head and he looked toward the window. You understand nothing, boy. You think this is the army. You are so small-minded. This is much bigger than anything this planet is ready for, he whispered. Aliens? You expect me to believe that aliens are behind this? I asked. I saw them, Peter. Tall, gray-skinned beings with eyes of fire. They spoke to my very soul, twisted my mind. They controlled me. They've been controlling me all along. They are the ones that brought you back to this island, he whispered. My mouth felt dry as he finished speaking. It sounded absurd. What would extraterrestrials want with somebody like me? Or Philip or Jen? Why were they gathering us? Tell me the truth, Mr. Ward. Did you kill those people? I asked. Instead of responding, he began to smash his head against the wall, and I shouted for a nurse. By the time that they had arrived, he had fallen unconscious. I quickly gathered what I had brought and made a phone call to Jen to meet me near the canyon. I think I have an idea about the canyon. Can you get the others to come? I asked her. Everyone except Philip is here. He went to Macy's gravesite, she told me. I told her to meet me around noon and then pulled up alongside the small cemetery. Just as Jen said, Philip was there looking down at the grave. What do you want, Pete? He snapped as soon as he saw me. Jennifer told me that you were here. I want to make amends, I lied. I needed him to come to the canyon too because he had received a letter from Macy. That meant that he was connected to all of this somehow. It looks like your mom stitched you up. Guess I went a little too hard, he said with a shrug. What brings you back here? I asked, gesturing toward the grave. I think we are all asking that. Jen told me that others got the same letter from Macy. It feels like we've been guided here for a purpose, and I wish I knew why, Philip admitted. I did my best to not let him know that I felt the same, but offered some encouragement to get him on my side. The answers are in that canyon. Jen is getting the others to come there this afternoon. You should come too. I think the only way that we can learn what is happening is if we go together, I told him. West shrugged and nodded, walking to the rental car that he's got. I'll come. But if it turns out to be another waste of time, Pete, I'll knock you down again. As he drove off, I scratched the back of my head and wondered what he meant. What moment in our past did he consider a waste? I checked the time and went to get my things before driving toward the canyon. My hope was to resolve this mystery and be on the evening ferry to the mainland, but that never happened. As I arrived, I saw that the old buildings used for ticket sales and memorabilia looked like they were about to fall apart. The new owner must not be trying to keep it looking fresh, I realized. I saw everyone gathered next to the building. Jen didn't seem amused that we were all summoned here. What did you call us here for, Pete? She asked. The tour only works if we get a whole group. We go down together and get the truth. It's that simple, I told her. That was another lie. I didn't want to admit it, but ever since I had arrived, I had been telling such lies to the people closest to me. I wanted to know what this canyon was hiding, and I was willing to do whatever it took to find out, even if it meant that these people might get hurt in the process. I didn't know for sure that we would be safe, but I had to keep pushing forward. The tour guide was an older gentleman probably not connected to the new owner at all. Much like my father, just another clueless local trying to make ends meet. They asked us all for our driver's licenses. They seemed happy to see that all of us were locals. I hadn't really checked to make sure about that, but I found the information odd. So many people have tried to leave Grey Fork over the years, and now something has drawn us back. Howard Ward believed it was extraterrestrial in origin. My mother believed that it had something to do with the government. I wasn't sure what to think anymore as we all boarded a cart and our guide took us into the canyon. Despite the fact that it was a clear day, once we were deep enough, the rock walls prevented any light from shining down. It occurred to me that even though this place had such an impact on my life, this was my first time coming here. Maybe I always knew that it was trouble, I thought. As we drove, the guide mumbled the same old legend that all of us had heard before. Of course, they didn't mention the radiation poisoning that nearly closed the place down for good, but I decided to push my luck and ask, "Are people still getting sick? Is it really safe to come down here? Why did they close this place for so long?" I asked. The guide gave me a cold glare as we got toward the deeper parts of the cave, apparently not expecting somebody to know that part of the story. "Oh, this place has never done anything like that. It's only bogus rumors. It heals people. You'll see soon enough." He parked and urged us all to follow deeper. The path led underground. All of us were silent as we walked into the cave, and I asked Jen if she had ever come down here before. "My dad said I couldn't. He said he didn't want me to wind up like the people that he sent down here." That made my stomach do flips as I asked the others the same thing, and I soon learned that none of us had ever been down to this canyon before. But all of us grew up here and we knew about this place. So why did we never come? I asked out loud. As if to answer my question, the guide punched a key code into a door in front of us and told us all to enter a very dark and very cold room. But I saw something glowing inside. Mesmerized by it, I walked into the room and stared up at what looked like a glowing green stone. It had to be at least the size of a small car. It had markings all across its exterior, but none of them resembled any human language that I understood. I couldn't help but feel my heart skip a beat. So it really was aliens this whole time? I asked in amazement. The guide laughed and remarked, "This is just a meteorite. Nothing special here. But I'm not surprised you've heard the rumors about the aliens. It's kind of our spill to sell tickets." "What are these markings then?" Philip asked as he tried to reach out and touch the stone. Before he got too close, he jolted back. It feels like the thing's on fire." "That beats me if I know, I just work here," the guide said and encouraged everyone to take as many pictures as we wanted. "You'll see your equipment doesn't work down here anyway. People enjoy that part of the phenomenon," he remarked. I pulled Jen and Philip to the side, whispering in their ears. "We need to find a way to go deeper. Something tells me that this guide is only telling us half the story." "Now let me see what I can do," Jen said with a wink and strolled over to the guide to start flirting with him. I was amazed at how she was able to trick him. It was like flipping a switch. "It makes you feel like you're back in high school," Philip said, nudging me with a laugh. A few moments later, after bribing the guide, he let us be alone with the stone. "How much time do we have?" I asked. "As much as we want, I guess. That old dude didn't know anything, and I'm starting to think that there's nothing here," Jen said with a sigh. I suggested that we needed to check the rest of the cave and make sure that there weren't any secret passageways. This couldn't possibly be all that was hidden here, I thought as we spread out to the crevices in the room. As we looked around, I noticed other markings that matched the glowing stone near the base of the floor. The entire room, as a matter of fact, seemed to be somehow connected in some way. It made me wonder if when the guide brought us inside, if we had stepped inside as something. "There's something here," one of the people shouted, pointing near some kind of pedestal. It was large enough for them to stand on. As we cleared away other debris, I realized that there were more similar items on the floor. Each resembled a standing circle that was big enough to remain perfectly still on. As Jen stepped on one of them, the stone sunk into the floor and gave off a glow just like the central orb. "There are enough pedestals here that all of us can stand on them. In fact, I think it's the exact number of people in this room," Philip commented. We took a closer look and determined that he was right. "Maybe something happens when we step on them all together," I guessed. Immediately the others wanted to give it a try. I was the last to stand on a pedestal, and as I did it, I immediately felt unsettled in my body. The room was colder and more claustrophobic, darker. "Something's off," Jen said. The others were already standing on the pedestals, preventing us from stopping what we had set into motion. The stone in the middle of the room began to glow ever brighter, and I felt my body become heavy. And then we started to float. "Peter, what the heck is happening?" Jennifer shouted. "I'm not sure. Try to push yourself to the door," I told her. As soon as I had uttered those words, I saw that the door was beginning to shut behind a wall of stone. We were trapped in this room and it felt like I was beginning to suffocate. The stone began to spin and its glow blinded my vision. I could feel my skin begin to blister and burn, cracking across my arms and turning my pigment a dull gray. Just as suddenly as it had begun, we fell back down to the ground in the room, all of us gasping and breathing and feeling the need to throw up. "What the heck just happened?" Philip asked. None of us had the answer. I noticed that the stone was still spinning. "I don't think we're out of the woods just yet," I said. Near where the door had been, I heard voices and saw people that looked like miners entering the cave. My arms felt too heavy to lift, but I tried to get their attention. One of them raised a gun to Philip and ordered him to stand down. I soon realized that these were army officers, likely coming to investigate what had happened. I raised my hands over my head, my vision adjusting to the room. And that was when I saw Jennifer. Her body was dull and devoid of color, her skin cracked and brittle like rocks. I looked down at my own body and realized the same thing had happened to me. Something in this room had transformed us. The soldiers kept shouting orders as we tried to stand. "No, stop, we need your help," Philip pleaded as one of the officers kicked him back on the ground. It was as though they didn't understand what we were saying. And then they used the blunt end of a rifle and knocked him unconscious. I was next. I found myself struggling to even fight back. The world around me went black before I could even scream. We woke up chained to metal tables. It took me a moment to realize that we were no longer in the canyon. I couldn't shout to the others or check to see if they were all right. As I focused on the objects in the room, I saw a calendar near the door. October 1976. That couldn't possibly be accurate, I thought, as I heard voices outside of where they were holding us. The military officials had returned. A man in his late 50s entered the room and noticed that I was awake. "Water?" he offered, uncapping a bottle. "You've made a mistake. We're just civilians. We live here on Grey Fork," I told him. "Son, I know exactly who you are. I've been expecting this day for nearly 70 years, he commented. I got a good look at him, trying to figure out if he was bluffing or just insane. "You don't look a day over 55, and that would be pushing it. What's going on here? Are you involved in this cover-up at Colton's Canyon?" I asked. "You ask a lot of questions. Colton's has been closed for years now. In fact, we were waiting for your arrival to reopen the place," he said as he sipped his water and walked toward the next table. The person there thrashed and tried to fight back as the officer took a syringe and plunged it into their chest. "You have no idea what you are, now do you, son?" he asked. He turned around and showed me that he had extracted a vial of blood from them. It gave off the same bright light as the stone in the canyon. "I know that you're violating human rights. I have a lawyer back in Illinois," I snapped. "Your lawyer hasn't even been born yet. You think I'm joking?" The man said and turned to a monitor, flipping it on to show the newscast. "This is 1976. You know that we're from the future. Who are you?" It felt as though my brain was overwhelmed with this information, as he took my blood as well and smiled. "I'm here to make sure that you fulfill your destiny." As he left, I turned to the other person, wishing that I could find a way to break our bonds. None of this made any sense, but I was determined to help us escape. A few hours later, masked techs arrived and began to pump drugs into the other prisoner. The army guy stood by watching and wrote reports as the test continued. My friend writhed in pain at first, but then it became so overwhelming that they just laid there and let them do the tests. "What are you trying to accomplish?" I asked the army officer. "The 8 of you come from the year 2023. That's almost 50 years ahead in our time. Yet you have traveled backwards in time, and your physical body will continue to reverse in the timeline the longer that you stay here. Such an ability is remarkable and worth studying. It could easily help the entire human race to fight old age," he explained. "So, we're just your guinea pigs," I shouted in anger. 70 years ago, you appeared in the canyon like a fire descending from heaven. You had nearly lost all sense of humanity, but after we procured your corpses from the UFO, we discovered the truth. Despite your alien exterior, your cellular structure was still human. We've been studying it ever since. I'm living proof that the treatment can work. I should be dead by now, but your blood has kept me alive." Even as he finished the sentence, he used the old vial of blood on himself, smiling mercilessly as we were poked and prodded. "So yeah, you'll be my test subjects as long as possible. It's for the betterment of mankind, you know." He laughed. Something deep inside of me became so angry, I started to feel like I did in the cave, my skin blistering and burning. Suddenly, I was able to break free from my bonds. The tech nearby tried to sedate me, but I subdued them as well, and then freed the other man alongside me. "We need to find the others," I said, my body feeling light as a feather as I searched the outer hallway. The nearby rooms had our friends in them, and as I started to use my newfound strength to bust their doors open, I found that some of them hardly even looked human anymore. I stepped into the next experiment chamber where Philip was thrashing around on the floor like an animal. His body was elongated like a snake, his skin stretched beyond measure, and his eyes bulged as he struggled to breathe. I realized in that horrible moment where the stories of the gray aliens were coming from. They were turning people just like us into these monsters. I realized as Philip tried to reach out in desperation toward me. I knew that I couldn't help him. I sealed the door shut and told the others to make sure that we didn't open it. "We're running out of time. We need to find a way out of here," Jennifer said as she joined us. It looked like the mutations hadn't affected her as greatly, but she was still struggling. Deep scars in her face resembled Gale's, and I wondered if we would ever even be able to breathe oxygen again once the transformation was complete. Jennifer saw the end results of Philip and did her best to not panic, shouting orders to the others as we moved to the second floor of this prison. Just as we got to the top of the steps, I heard the door that we had sealed fall apart. It sounded like a bomb going off. Philip was following and he was angry, screaming and attacking everyone that he got close to. In front of us, soldiers attempted to barricade our escape, and I found myself acting like my friend. Whatever they had done to us gave us extraordinary strength, tossing them aside like rag dolls. As we reached the outside of our prison, I found myself unable to move because of the brilliance of the sun. Jennifer shrieked and fell to the ground, her eyes no longer able to handle the light. Soldiers surrounded us, and I thought for sure that our escape was in vain. The officer that had first found us approached me, a smile appearing on his face. "Amazing. You're just like the aliens that I met 70 years ago. You're a miracle, the next stage of human evolution," he commented. He ordered us to be taken to the crystal chamber. Despite our effort to fight back, we were escorted into a boat and soon found ourselves being transported to Grey Fork, to the canyon. "I can't believe this is happening. Why is this happening?" I whispered as I watched the waves of the lake crash against the boat. As we reached the canyon, the soldiers led us through a different passageway. This one was littered with corpses, gray-skinned aliens that looked like they had become a part of the cave wall. Except I understood how these creatures were once human like us, taken from our present, brought here to this cruel past to be experimented on. We've been manipulated since the start, I thought as we were forced into the crystal room again. Despite the fact that we were missing Philip, our bodies began to experience the same symptoms as before. I prayed for unconsciousness. The room around us began to glow and shimmer, and we were again hurtled into an unknown space. This one looked much different than before. The cave almost resembled a control room. I stumbled over to one of the monitors to get an idea of where we were, but the readings made no sense. If I was reading it correctly, we were flying above the surface of the earth. An alarm blared near the crystal. Jennifer reached for it with her bony hands and activated a communications device. "Unidentified aircraft, this is General George Aylesbury. Stand down or be fired upon," a voice shouted. "Oh, no, God, no. I think they're going to shoot us down," Jennifer said. My head was spinning, but I knew what was happening, even as the monitors told us that missiles were firing upon us. We had been thrust into the distant past, where the UFO had first crashed onto Grey Fork. Except we were the ones piloting the ship that was about to crash. The ship began to go up in flames as the missiles struck us, and I held on to whatever I could. The massive metallic ship hurtling toward the surface. Rocks and glass and debris crashed all around us as we hit the ground. The merciful darkness my only comfort as I became pinned under the rubble. I'm not sure how long I stayed there. When I heard voices approach, I saw army officers shooting at my friends, killing them without even realizing that they were hurting their fellow man. I found the strength to shout to them, and the officers hesitated when my voice sounded human. They instead stunned me and removed me from the rubble, dragging me toward transport that would take me away from the canyon. As I left the control room that was now buried in the cave, I apologized to Jennifer, hearing her ragged voice beg for death as I was taken away. Approximately 30 minutes later, I was in chains before the same man that I had seen in the 70s, except he looked slightly younger. "You speak our language?" Aylesbury asked as several of his doctors took samples of my blood. "I am from the future. I'm a human just like you," I told him weakly. "A human? That's not possible. Such a wild claim would require evidence," he commented. I used the only idea that I had available and gave him a few details of the coming years, including what would happen here on Grey Fork. The general rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Amazing. Such technology is beyond even our wildest dreams. I'm sorry to say this, but you'll have to stay here and be monitored. We need to know everything that we can about this UFO and the powers that it gave you," Aylesbury ordered. "Should we put him with the other?" an officer asked. The general gave a nod and I was dragged back to the barracks. Once in my cell, I took the time to mourn my friends. Jennifer, Philip, and the others were dead, all because of my actions. I thought as I looked across the room and saw another figure there in the shadows. The figure looked familiar but different. I took a step closer and I called out to them. And then I heard a voice that I knew I couldn't mistake. "Peter, you got my letter," the voice said. "Macy? What have they done to you?" I said as I saw her body. We both were no longer the people that we had once been. "Nothing that I didn't want to happen. I knew that you would be here eventually. It was fate," Macy said wistfully. "The others are dead, Macy," I told her. She didn't seem fazed by this news, her dark eyes glistening like stars. "In the times that we come from, I went to the canyon like so many had before us. I wanted to learn what secrets it held, and I was thrust into the past just like you. They tortured me, experimented on me, and did unspeakable things to me that no human should endure. And then it occurred to me that I was no longer human. The stone, the ship, it had changed me. Powers beyond our understanding have manipulated time and space for us to be a part of their plan, and I at least understood why when the stone spoke to me, sending me here to the distant past," Macy whispered. I got closer to her, trying to understand what she was saying. It sounded like madness, but I had already experienced so much that I knew that it had to be true. "The stone, is that the real alien life form?" I guessed. "It's been altering our body for a purpose, Peter. Don't you see it? We are ushering in the next chapter of humanity. Our planet will be forever changed thanks to what they have done to us," she told me. "You mean the stone tricked us, sending us back into the past because it knew that these soldiers would use us as guinea pigs," I realized. "You saw the corpses in the canyon, more fodder for its endless hunger, Peter. We are simply slaves to it now. The soldiers are no different even if they don't realize it. Their thoughts and actions are all being driven by their greed and desire for power. Power that the life form will never give them," she told me. I found myself unable to stand, the overwhelming meaninglessness of my life crushing me as I shook and cried. I had tried so hard to escape from Grey Fork, but it had always been a part of me. Everyone and everything I ever knew was just a cog in the machine of a power beyond my imagination. Now my only hope was death one day, either at the hands of the soldiers or the alien that had changed my body and made me in its image. "How long will we be here, Macy?" I asked. My friend made a shriek but didn't move. She had resigned herself to this fate as well. "Forever. I think we're trapped here as long as we live, and even if we die, we become a part of the living ship that altered our bodies. This island, all of this, we are all fuel to its appetite," she whispered. I wanted to cry and to laugh, but the only response that I really had was anger. That anger led to silence over the years, as these soldiers used us again and again to experiment on themselves, unaware that they were being used by the very ship that had crashed so long ago. Eventually, I knew that I would become a part of the ship too, like so many others. My only passion over the years became writing this account, hiding it from sight and storing it for the future. One day, far from now, perhaps in the time that I came from, somebody will find this account and learn the truth about Grey Fork. There are aliens here, and we are the monsters that have made this hell.